Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. And dry and hot wind swept the streets of Montclair, as if to remind its inhabitants of the dust of the past that the city still refused to admit. Located in the southern United States, Montclair was the kind of city that wanted to appear reconciled with itself, that repainted its facades, that boasted its renovated city center, but whose social foundations remained cracked by decades of segregation, complicit silences, and shifty glances. The red brick buildings of the city center vibrated under the blazing midday sun. The cafe windows reflected flashes of light that briefly blinded passers-by. The smell of hot asphalt and grilled hot dogs hung in the air. The sidewalks, wide and lined with sparse trees, were alive with the ballet of daily life. Office workers out for fresh air, students on break, tourists with cameras, mothers pushing baby carriages, delivery men in a hurry. Everyone was going somewhere, without really looking at each other. And in this crowd, a silhouette stood out: a man. Tall, black, straight as an oak rooted in the southern earth. He wore a perfectly tailored navy suit, a simple tie, and an immaculate shirt. In his hand, a patinated leather briefcase, discreetly luxurious. Governor Elijah Marcus Bryant, the first African-American to be elected state president. A living symbol of what Montclair claimed to have become, and what it still wasn't. That day, Elijah had chosen to walk in no limousine, no official motorcade, no security guards with earpieces. Just him, his thoughts, and the street he refused to abandon to the fantasies of fear or contempt. He had an important meeting with community leaders, but it wasn't the kind of meeting you honor in closed and tinted glass. He wanted to see the city, breathe it in, listen to it. He passed a bookstore where an old black man was reading peacefully on the steps. A kid recognized him and gave him a discreet wave. Elijah returned the wave with a slight smile. Dignity didn't scream, it radiated. But at one intersection, this controlled peace was violently interrupted. A police car braked sharply, the tires squealing on the asphalt. She positioned herself sideways, almost blocking the path. The roar of the engine seemed to announce what was coming next like a dull threat. "Hey, you there!" a dry, metallic voice yelled, aggressive from the first syllable. The policeman Travis McConnell went down. White, 40-ish, set jaw, heavy gait. His uniform seemed to have lost its shape. As if worn by the habit of to dominate rather than serve, he held his belt in one heavy hand, the other resting not far from his weapon. His gaze did not seek to understand. He evaluated, classified, condemned. Elijah turned around, without abruptness, without fear. "Hello, officer. May I help you?" he said calmly. "This area is reserved for officials and accredited members. I've seen you prowling around here. I'm on my way to an appointment in the administrative building." "Not what I asked you. Get out your papers. Now." He wasn't shouting, but each word was charged with controlled contempt, a poorly digested power. A silence fell around them. Passers-by slowed. A waitress behind a cafe window set down her cup. A delivery man, his hands on the handlebars of his bicycle, remained frozen. A phone was raised, then 2, then 10. Elijah took a deep breath that he had experienced this his whole life. The scrutiny, the suspicion, the stare that searches for the fault in your skin color. But today, he wasn't a student being singled out. He wasn't an activist. He was the governor. He calmly took out his wallet and held out his card. McConnell ripped it off, not out of necessity, but out of habit. The habit of belittling, of controlling, of imposing an invisible hierarchy, one in which a black man can only exist out of tolerance, never out of right. When his eyes fell on the name, his face froze. Elijah Marcus Bryant, governor of the state of Carolina. The paper suddenly seemed to burn between his fingers. He paled. His gaze blurred. He swallowed. Elijah, still motionless, picked up his papers with measured slowness, then looked at him, straight in the eyes. "Did you know who I was?" "And no, Mr. Governor. What if I hadn't been the governor? What if I had been another black man, in a suit, walking confidently through a neighborhood that's too quiet for you?" McConnell opened his mouth, but no coherent words came out. Elijah took a step closer. There was no threat in his gesture, just a sovereign, naked, irrefutable authority. "I am not here to humiliate you, officer. I am here to serve a people of which you are also a part. But understand this. Your uniform is not a license to be arrogant, nor is it a weapon to indulge your prejudices. Then he turned his head towards the crowd, raised his voice slightly, not to shout, but for history to hear. Today, it's not me you tried to arrest. It's what I represent. A black man, standing tall, dignified, and in his place. He put away his card, closed his wallet, and calmly continued walking. He didn't look back that he didn't need it. Around him, the looks had changed, eyes full of respect, of admiration, of awareness. The city, for a moment, fell silent. And Travis McConnell, frozen on the sidewalk, felt the weight of 100 phones pointed at him, like a silent tribunal. Not that of the judges, that of the people. That same evening, in the apparent calm of their homes, thousands of Montclair residents, and far beyond the city limits, watched an event unfold on their screens that would mark a turning point. The images, captured by several passers-by and instantly posted on social media, were brutal and striking. It showed police officer Travis McConnell, his face grim and his tone harsh, arresting a dapper man in a Navy suit. The man didn't resist, responded calmly to orders, but was treated like a mere suspect. The contrast was striking, a democratically elected black governor reduced to a mere number in an abusive police routine. Very quickly, the videos went viral. On Twitter, less hashtags #Governor Bryant, #ProfiledRacial, #Justice visibly exploded in popularity. Thousands of messages, shares, reactions, and indignant comments poured in from all corners of the country. TikTok. The clips edited in loops showed gestures, looks, words, amplifying the collective emotion. On Instagram, powerful posts recounted testimonies, mixing anger, solidarity, and hope. In the days that followed, media pressure escalated. Journalists, previously absent from the back streets of Montclair, flooded the city. Television crews trained their cameras on the police station, on the scene of the incident, on neighborhoods where social tension had long been simmering. The police department opened an internal investigation, a seemingly necessary measure, but fraught with skepticism. Voices were raised, often polarized. Some defended McConnell, citing procedure, workplace stress, and human error. Others denounced a deeply racist system, where Elijah's arrest was merely a visible manifestation of a greater evil. But Elijah Marcus Bryant steadfastly refused to play the victim. He knew this trap all too well, the one that confines the black man to a posture of suffering, forgetting his power to act. A few days after the incident, he organized a press conference in a large municipal hall. On stage, he wasn't alone. Alongside him were families whose children had been victims of police violence. Former black police officers, now passionate reformers. Activists, local elected officials, engaged citizens. In front of the world's cameras, Elijah spoke with a clear and determined voice. What you saw yesterday is not an isolated case. What I experienced, countless others experience every day, without a camera, without a title, without a voice. A collected silence followed. My duty is not to complain, but to act. We can no longer turn a blind eye to the systemic racial profiling that plagues our justice system. We must ensure that every citizen is treated with dignity, respect, and justice, regardless of their color, background, or attire. He then announced a major initiative, the introduction of a bill bearing his name, the Bryant Police Integrity Act. This law proposed several concrete and ambitious measures. The obligation for all police officers to wear body cameras permanently during their interventions. The implementation of mandatory and annual training in racial justice, intended to deconstruct the prejudices and to raise awareness among law enforcement diversity. The creation of a public and transparent register of disciplinary complaints against police officers, accessible to all citizens. The applause was long and vibrant. Many in the room knew that this law could change the course of events. For his part, Travis McConnell was quickly summoned before a public disciplinary committee. In front of the cameras, his superiors, and the public, he was forced to answer for his actions. I didn't know who he was. He stammered, trying to justify his behavior. The investigator, a calm but firm woman, answered him. Exactly. That's the crux of the matter, Mr. McConnell. You didn't arrest him because he was doing something illegal, but because he was black, self-confident, and your gaze condemned him before he even spoke. A heavy silence fell over the room. McConnell was suspended from duty while undergoing intensive training. This training, imposed by the new Bryant administration, was led by former black police officers who had left the profession to speak out against the abuses they themselves had experienced and witnessed. For several months, he was confronted with the reality of systemic violence, prejudices rooted in police culture, but also stories of courage, change, and redemption. The press followed this journey, which became a symbol of a collective desire for change. On the streets of Montclair, something had changed. The discussions in cafes, the debates in schools, the neighborhood meetings took on a new tone. The incident, filmed, shared, and debated, was no longer just an isolated injustice. It had become a appeal to conscience. For Elijah Marcus Bryant, this fight was far from over. But that night, as he gazed at the stars above the balcony of his home, he knew he had planted a seed of hope, justice, and above all, dignity. The name of Elijah Marcus Bryant resonated far beyond the borders of Montclair. Across the country, his face became a powerful symbol, not for a flamboyant heroic pose, but for the quiet strength of a man who refused to bow under the weight of racism. In schools, teachers recounted this story in civics classes, presenting it as an example of dignity and moral courage. Children, especially young black boys, identified with this image. They too, dressed in little costumes during performances or games, proudly mimed the governor's firm and serene posture on the street that day. This simple gesture, walking confidently in a world that too often seeks to make them invisible, became an act of resistance. But Elijah himself wasn't seeking glory. For him, all this was just the beginning. A year later, at an official ceremony at the Capitol, before an attentive and emotional crowd, Elijah delivered a speech that would be remembered for a long time. "I don't want to be admired," he said, his voice calm but vibrant with conviction. "I want every young man in this country to be able to walk down the street with the confidence that he is respected. Not because he is famous, not because he wears a suit, but because he is simply human. Because he deserves that dignity, that recognition, unconditionally." He insisted on this fundamental principle, recalling that justice and respect should not be privileges granted to a few, but universal rights. For his part, Travis McConnell, the police officer whose clumsy and humiliating arrest had triggered this shockwave, was changing profoundly. The suspension, the training, the confrontations with his own prejudices had shaken his certainties. One day, in an unexpected gesture, he asked to meet the governor privately. The request was granted, but the meeting took place away from the public eye, discreet, almost secret. When they came face to face, McConnell, his voice trembling, said bluntly, "I'm not asking you for forgiveness. I'm asking you how to change." The weight of these words was immense, testifying to a new humility, a sincere desire to reconcile with himself and with those he had hurt. Elijah, his gaze serious but without animosity, answered softly, "Start by listening. Really listen. Then walk beside me, not in front of me, not behind me, right beside me." So, on a quiet street in Montclair, away from the cameras and the speeches, they walked together. Two men who seemed to be polar opposites. Two distinct paths, two different stories. Yet, side by side, they embodied the hope for a possible future where dialogue would replace confrontation, where understanding would grow where there was only suspicion. That day, they were not marching for history, nor for glory. They were marching for the future. A future where every step, even the smallest, can make a difference.